Green means go. Hello and welcome to Space News Day 8. My name's Mike Bardwell. Happy to have you here. I read the news so you don't have to. Let's get into an Ars Technica space article called Rocket Report, Iran Reaches Orbit, Chinese Firm Achieves Impossible Landing Test by Eric Berger. Subtitle, Our investors' continued support is a recognition of our 18 months of hard work. Who's this reference to? The Iranians or the Chinese? First and second stages of Blue Origin's New Glenn test vehicle. Okay. That's three different topics all mixed into one. Let's see where they're going with this. Welcome to edition 6.28 of the Rocket Report. There's been a lot going on in this world, in the world of launch, as always. But this week, I want to take this space for a personal message. Eric has just announced the forthcoming publication of his second book, Re-Entry, on the Falcon 9 rocket, Dragon spacecraft, and the development of reusable launch vehicles. So we've been reading a lot of Eric Berger's articles in my videos. So if you want to go support him, if you find this topic interesting, go check that out. As always, read your submissions. Okay, so Europe seeks to support small launch companies. The ESA and European Commission have selected 5 launch companies to participate in a new program to provide flight opportunities for new technologies. This is a sign of a greater role of the EU and in the launch capabilities of space. So currently in the EU, they have one major company. It's a French company called Arianespace. They launch Vega rockets, and they have quite a checkered history of success. It's not close to SpaceX. SpaceX has a clear dominance in the market. And so it makes sense that the EU, who is kind of close or the closest out of everyone else, out of everyone in the West, would step their game up and try to make a launch vehicle that can land itself, that can provide, 99% security, or a promise that they're going to get your satellites into space, into orbit where you want them to be. So hopefully the ESA and Arianespace and these other up and coming companies can get their act together, because the more competition, the lower the price will be, and that's really what's allowed a lot of these younger satellite companies with not as much cash flow as like a Boeing or a Lockheed Martin to get 3, 6, 9 satellites into space, start generating some revenue that they can pour back into the development of new science, new Earth observation satellites, radio satellites, whatever application we need at that time. So the effort seeks to stimulate demand for European launch services by allowing companies to compete for the missions in European or in the EU's, in-orbit demonstration and validation technology program. Proposals for the program's first phase are due to the ESA at the end of February. I want to take a little aside here. So when I hear the word validation, it always brings me back to verification versus validation. This is something a wall that I run into quite a bit. So the words can often be misinterpreted. They can be considered synonymous. They can be swapped in meaning, but there's actually a very technical difference between these two terms in the world of engineering. So verification is the process of checking that a software achieves its goal without any bugs. It is a process to ensure whether the product that is developed is a right fit. It verifies whether the developed product fulfills the requirements that we have. So verification is static testing. Verification means, are we building the product right? Validation is the process of checking whether the software product is up to the mark, or in other words, the product has high-level requirements. It is the process of checking the validation of product. I don't think this is a very good definition, to be honest. No, this is bad. I think Wikipedia will have something a little more robust, which is it's funny to say. Your teachers always tell you never to use Wikipedia as a primary source. Yet, I find in so many occasions that the Wikipedia article is the best place to find places to hop, to find the links to hop to. So verification and validation are independent procedures that are used to check for quality, blah, blah, blah. So here's how it's defined by IEEE. According to Wikipedia, validation is the assurance that a product, service, or system meets the needs of the customer and other identified stakeholders. So before you start any project, any professional project, you want to go to your customers, you want to say, give me a list of written requirements. Validation is the method of going through and verifying. See? You see how difficult it is? You switch these words so easily. Is the method of checking that your functionality meets those requirements. It often involves acceptance and suitability with external customers, contrast with verification. So verification is the evaluation of whether or not a product, service, or system complies with a regulation, requirement, specification, or imposed condition. It is often an internal process. This doesn't, good Lord, this is not making this any more clear. So verification, product meets the given requirements or not. Validation, product meets the customer need or not. Okay. So there will be a distinction. The customer will provide requirements, but those requirements may be outdated. They might not be exactly what the customer actually needs. It's just what the customer thinks they need. So that for me is the distinction in this first point. Verification is an internal process done by quality control. Validation is external process done by the customer. So that's a very clear distinction. One tells you, but I've seen this used, and this is used very often from, within companies. But then again, you can make the argument that groups within companies act as external customers in a way, and so I see how you can use these two. So verification done in quality control process, validation done in validation scope process. That's a new term. I've never heard of validation scope before, but that would allow you to separate, to create a list underneath verification scope and validation scope and be more clear with the difference in these definitions. If product meets requirements, it doesn't matter if it is not suitable for customer needs. That's verification. The way that that's phrased sounds like you're giving a big FU to the customer because, hey, I just filled in your requirements. I don't care if it works or not for you. You typically want to have a tighter feedback loop than what this makes it sound like with your customer, so that you make sure you're developing the right product for them. And validation, suitability to customer needs is important. Okay. Let's jump off that train. So getting a golden ticket. The agency expects to select up to 3 companies for initial contracts with a combined value of 82 million US to begin design work on those vehicles. Sometimes I get the inflection wrong because I'm reading quickly and I'm not picking up commas versus periods. I should be paying more attention for your sake. 4 of the companies selected for the Flight Ticket Initiative, sounds like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, are startups working on small launch vehicles. ISAR Aerospace, Orbex, PLD Space, and Rocket Factory Augsburg. None of them has yet conducted an orbital launch, but they expect to do so within the next 2 years. I'm wondering where they're going to launch from. The 5th company was Arianespace, who is the current incumbent, which will offer rideshare launches on its Vega C and Ariane 6 rockets. Okay, now we're moving on to Iran. Iran, sorry, I believe that's how it's correctly pronounced. Iran successfully launches the, I'm not even going to bother, 100 rocket. Iran said Saturday that it has conducted a successful, you know what, I'd love to learn. How do you actually say this? Can you just go pronounce? Wikipedia sometimes has those audio buttons. Yes, this helps me. That was a 3-stage rocket. Cool. That's not helping me. Is there a website where it just teaches you how to pronounce? Let's try how to pronounce. Okay, so there's a website that teaches you how to do this. Is it going to paywall me? Okay, let's try that. It's not French. Sure.
Kamshar. Kamshar.
Chem. Probably something like chem. Let's try.
Game.
What?
Game.
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 Game. And let's hear what it sounds like in English.
Come.
Crum. I imagine that's closer to what it's actually pronounced, to how it's actually pronounced. Chem. Iran said Saturday it had conducted a successful satellite launch. This is Iran's National Guard, by the way. This is their military unit. It conducted a successful satellite launch into its highest orbit yet. The latest for the program, the West fears improves Tehran's ballistic missiles. The Iranian Saroya satellite was placed into orbit at 750 kilometers. That's pretty high. Typically, if you're performing Earth observation, you're closer to 4 or 5 and maybe 600. So 750, I'm wondering what kind of technology do they have on that satellite that would, I guess, permit such a high low Earth orbit. So above the Earth stage with its 3-stage Chem rocket, 100 rocket. Yeah, so this is as given by the state-run Iranian Revolutionary National Guard or whatever news agency. It did not immediately acknowledge what the satellite did, though telecommunications minister Isa Zarepur described the launch as having a 50-kilogram payload. Chem's first orbital flight. The U.S. has previously said that Iran's satellite launches defy a UN Security Council resolution and called on Tehran to undertake no activity involving ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons. UN sanctions related to Iran's ballistic program expired last October. Iran has always denied seeking nuclear weapons and says the space program, like its nuclear activities, is for purely civilian purposes. This was the third launch of the Chem rocket, which can loft up to 80 kilograms to low Earth orbit. Guys and gals, that's not a lot of payload capability. 80 kilograms gets you 2 CubeSats. In terms of deadly payload, perhaps 80 kilograms can carry something, atomic and deadly. In terms of being able to launch a Starlink type network that allows, that gives potential adversaries extreme capabilities. Like, this is nothing close to, in terms of people that the West considers a threat. This is nothing close to what China, what India, if they decide to go rogue, what Russia can already do. So this is not that crazy. and I want to be clear, I say the West considers a threat, trying to distance myself from the politics of this all, and to kind of just say what is generally accepted in the public sphere. None of this is a direct opinion of my own. A suborbital test flight in 2022 was successful, but the first orbital attempt last March failed. And last but not least, we talk about Chinese firms landing, performing a vertical landing. So Chinese startup Landspace executed a first vertical takeoff and vertical landing with a test article Friday at a launch and recovery site at a local spaceport. Space News, that's what Space News reported. The Methalox test article reached an altitude of around 350 meters during its roughly 60-second flight before setting down in a designated landing area. So they were able to land with an accuracy of roughly 2.4 meters per let's say this is correct, at a landing speed of less than 1 meter per second. So they're probably on par with what SpaceX is able to do with their boosters. So part Starship, part Falcon 9. The test is part of the development of the stainless steel Zhuke 3 rocket, which was first announced in November. The company is aiming for the first flight of the Zhuke 3 next year. It can carry a payload capacity of 21 tons. So let's compare that to what we just saw from the Iranian press release. They can carry 80 kilograms, and this Chinese rocket is aiming to carry 21 tons to low Earth orbit. The scales aren't even there. The scales are very different. And 18.3 tons when the rocket is recovering downrange. If Zhuke 3 comes to pass, and these are promising early results, this would be the closest thing to a Falcon 9 rocket anyone has developed. So let's see the Falcon 9 capacity. How many tons? Okay, so 9,500 kilograms. So let's do 9,000 grams to ton. That gives us 9.35 imperial tons. So it's not 21 tons. That's a heck of a lift. But SpaceX is developing Starlink as well, a spaceship as well. So let's do spaceship capacity. It's Starship capacity. So that's the propellant. God damn, look at that thing. Holy bejeebus. Bless my eyes. Okay, capacity. Crew capacity up to 100 people. That's mind-blowing. That's definitely the kind of rocket that you're building to go to a different planet. It's able to launch 100 tons. So I keep screwing this up. Starship is going to be able to push 5x what this next-gen Chinese rocket is going to be able to push. Wow, scales. Alpha onboarded for NRO missions. Firefly Aerospace, this is another up-and-coming, probably trying to surpass the United Launch Alliance in launches in the near future. Currently, if you're looking at the tier list, you have SpaceX way up here, and then let's drop to about D tier now. You're running into your, I keep getting this wrong, the Electron Rocket Company. Rocket Lab? Yeah. Then you're getting into your rocket labs, which are launching about 10 times a year. Then you have your ULA, your United Launch Alliance, which is launching 3 times a year. And then Firefly is just below that. They're much newer than the other 3 incumbents, and so like the ULA is the oldest, I believe. And so let's see if they can start to become competitive. So they were selected by the NRO to serve as a launch provider with the Alpha rocket. The NRO unwrapped Alpha as part of its streamlined launch contract, which so has a budget for up to $700 million for these launches. Scaling up to meet demand, Firefly is now able to compete for these mission task orders with Alpha, which can lift more than 1 metric ton to low Earth orbit. Firefly's next Alpha launch for NASA is on track for early 2024. In order to support the increased demand for Alpha launches, we've doubled the size of our faculties, implemented automated carbon composition technology, and fine-tuned our operations. Here's a French launch company raising $30 million. So they already have one, Arianespace. This is going to be company number 2. Latitude said this week that it closed $30 million Series B to support the development of its Zephyr launch vehicle. So Latitude is the company. Zephyr is a 2-stage rocket designed to deploy payloads of up to 100 kilograms into low Earth orbit. And that's expected to go up by 2025. Excuse me. Ooh. I'm sure that sounded great on your end. So the funding will be used to manufacture the rocket, establish a vehicle assembly line, complete electrical propulsion and fluidic systems and structural tests, bring the company's test center online, and recruit new talent. That is quite a lot to do with $30 million. Their investors' continued support is a recognition of 18 months of work, and they want to become a market leader by the end of the decade. This guy's name is Stanislas Maximin. That's quite a name. I love that. Stanislas. European venture capital firm raises 100 million euros. I don't know what happened to my voice. Expansion Ventures announced the capital raise this week for a fund to support the ESA and New Air Mobility. And New Air Mobility companies from seed rounds up to Series A and B funding rounds. Previously, it had invested 30 million euros in 13 startups. It's tracking a lot of initiatives. Expansion is targeting a final closing of 300 million euros by 2026 and plans to build a portfolio of around 40 companies. With the first tranche of funding secured, the fund has a database of over 480 startups currently. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Let's just finish. I want to finish off with the Ariane Group. So Ariane Group is preparing to ship the Ariane 6 core stage and upper stage that will use for the vehicle's first flight to their launch site in French Guiana, which is on the tip of South America. Sometimes next month, the hardware should be loaded onto the transport vessel Canopy for its 10-day transatlantic crossing to the port of Paracabo. I think that's it. And they're aiming for a summer launch. Okay, not that interesting. New Glenn showed a photograph of both stages of the New Glenn rocket. Starliner. Okay, we already explored this before. So Starliner on track for an April launch. NASA said it is working with Boeing towards a flight test no earlier than mid-April, okay, in which the Starliner spacecraft will carry 2 NASA astronauts. So this is a spacecraft, not a launch vehicle, to the ISS. Boeing also completed the removal of the P213 tape that may have posed a flammability risk in certain environmental conditions. What does this look like? It's electrical tape. Okay. There were roughly 4,300 feet of the tape in the spacecraft. They had to remove 4,300 feet of electrical tape. Why? What? How did they... Like, at what point were they like, wow, this is flammable, and have all of the engineers simultaneously scratch their heads and start sweating? The mission will launch on the Atlas V rocket and is the first crewed mission on board Starliner. Let's wrap this up with a picture of a beautiful Starliner. Wow. Wow, just look at that capsule. That's beautiful. So it's a vehicle created by Boeing. For those of you not in the know, has a nice NASA logo up top. And just look at this. It's so futuristic. It has a what I believe is an observation port up top. So this looks like a place where you could put a camera. What else can we pick out from the image? I assume this was used for fuel exchange. These look like vents. By the way, I'm totally guessing. I genuinely have no idea. I mean, these also look like it was for a connector. So inside of this, you would need some sort of command and control module, some sort of gyroscopic element to like large reaction wheels to allow you to orient your spacecraft while you're shooting yourself. It's essentially effectively a bullet ripping around the Earth. And so as that bullet rips, you can use gyroscopes to give yourself attitude control and point in certain directions. So I would love to see this thing point itself from its current orientation downward, so that observation port is facing the Earth, and you just have your satellite, your astronaut photographer sitting in there clicking pictures, or they'd have I imagine they're leaning back doing a bit of a gangster thing, but I'm sure they've placed the camera in some sort of hold. Anywho, thank you very much for sticking around. This has been fun. My name's Mike. You've watched Space News Day 8, and I will see your lovely faces tomorrow. Bye-bye.